Good evening sa lahat. Ako si Pia Ranada. Welcome to the third episode of Campaign Convos, isang podcast ng mga campaign reporters about the campaign season and the candidates, specifically the presidential and vice presidential candidates. So, bago ang lahat, we will introduce ourselves. So, ako si Pia Ranada, Rappler reporter, and reporter assigned to cover Isko Moreno and Willie Ong. Ay, mute.
Ay, sorry, ulitin ko ulit. Hi, my name is Bea Cupin. I cover Sara Duterte, PDP Laban, and naka-CMD Unity for Rappler, along with my partner who is not here, Lian Buan.
Hi, I'm Cepeda. I cover the presidential campaign of VP Lenny Robredo and the vice presidential bid of her running mate, Senator Kiko Pangilinan.
Ay, sorry ako na pala. Hello everyone, I'm Aika Rey and I cover Team Pacquiao and Atienza.
Hello, I'm Rambo Talabong and I cover the presidential run of Senator Panfilo Lacson and the vice presidential campaign of Senate President Vicente Soto III. Tito Sen.
Hi everyone, I'm Jairo Bolledo. I'm covering the presidential campaign of Labor leader Leody de Guzman and its running mate, Professor Walden Bello.
Okay, so episode na to, it's about surveys. So, alam naman natin, surveys, countdown yan. Every month rini-release na yung mga surveys, particularly by SWS, Social Weather Stations, and Pulse Asia. So, siguro before we begin the main discussion, maybe helpful lang rin to differentiate kung ano yung mga different kinds of surveys na nakita natin tuwing campaign season. So, in my experience covering campaigns, tatlo yan. So, merong regular na lumalabas na SWS and Pulse Asia, which now is every month. Yun yung mga ginagawa ng poll firms na yun out of their own initiative. Tapos second would be commission surveys. So they can be surveys na ginagawa ng the same poll firms or other firms, but those usually are coming from the camps, di ba? And alam natin na minsan may nalileak, either intentionally or intentionally, and usually pag intentionally, may parang agenda yan to kind of condition the minds of the public na, uy, may nangyayaring surge with this candidate or etc. But obviously, we take with a grain of salt yung mga commission surveys kasi medyo minsan, di ba, parang may mga questions that are targeted for a certain, like angle or agenda. So, we're careful also covering those. And yung third kind of survey na nakita natin, yung mga internal surveys. So, ito yung mga surveys na kept within the campaign team of the candidate and usually hindi siya pinapublicize. It's for the own strategic use of those campaign teams. So, yun, just to get that straight na parang yun yung mga surveys that we're talking about that are covered by this topic. So, siguro first question sa ating lahat, no? Kasi lumabas yung Pulse Asia survey recently covering the January period. So, yung mga candidates na kino-cover natin, like, how did they react to those surveys? And sa tingin niyo ba parang ano yung psychological impact ng surveys na yun on your candidate and also on like the campaign period as a whole, like the voters and even, the observers? Anyone can go. Siguro we can start with Mara.
So for yung paglabas kasi nung huling Pulse Asia survey, I got a lot of not a lot of supporters of VP Lenny was happy when I tweeted about it, but the latest Pulse Asia survey where she dropped 4 percentage points from her 20% in December came out actually after nung Pink Sunday rally. So for me, it really spoiled that day kasi ang laki talaga ng crowd doon sa Quezon Memorial Circle. I was there. I felt the energy of the supporters. But then sobrang wake-up call talaga yon for everybody that even if the pink revolution fever is so high, it has to be a wake-up call to the campaign team kasi bakit bumaba si VP Lenny when obviously the campaigns have been going all out for her. And so obviously I'm not surprised with the statement that VP Lenny spokesperson Barry Gutierrez said, and essentially they pointed out that that survey na ginawa ng Pulse was conducted in January, I believe, so it was not able to capture the series of presidential interviews and forums where Robredo performed very well. And syempre, I think this is also a perspective shared by other candidates in their campaign teams na yung kandidato nila, yung manok nila, magaling yung naging performance doon sa mga interviews, and that survey did not capture that. So this is also, I believe, the messaging that has been cascaded to the Robredo network of supporters and volunteers and campaign operators. Pero sa akin talaga, alarm bells yun eh. Kasi your candidate is doing the right things, but perhaps that 4% drop says something about the campaign team's air war and ground war na kailangan nilang trabahuin. Ito, ako kasi parang it's so easy kasi for supporters to say that it's false Asia, right? Or we don't believe in the surveys. Pero alam mo, hindi kasi maganda yung ganong pagtingin sa mga surveys kasi okay, paano kung mag number 1 na si VP Lenny? Maniniwala na kayo sa survey. So it's wrong eh. And yung Pulse Asia and SWS and actually even the Lilo survey, these are surveys that are always being monitored and checked, and campaign teams, politicians, candidates, and their political strategies look at these surveys, and usually they reflect their internal surveys as well. So you cannot just disregard these surveys kasi nakaka-capture siya eh. And believe you me, once na yung kandidato nila ay manguna sa survey, maniniwala na sila sa survey. So for me, the right perception would really the right disposition to have when it comes to the surveys and the performance of your candidates is to use that as motivation to do better.
I
Note
can go
din
next.
natin the reason why Pulse and SWS are always checked is because sila yung oldest poll firms. Like since the EDSA People Power, yung post-dictatorship, meron na silang surveys na ganito. So another thing is we can easily compare, di ba? Like how these candidates did 2016 elections, 2022 versus like 1998. So kaya important rin yung dalawang poll firms na yun. You were saying, Rambo?
Hindi. Sa akin kasi curious ako kay Mara kasi may isa pang survey na hindi siya election-related pero yung approval ratings, di ba? Parang lumabas din yun at ang daming nag-share nun na 1% lang si VP. Kasi di ba parang how does that affect naman the morale of the campaign team at saka the election sa team niya kaya?
That certainly caused a lot of frustration because they really feel that they've been gaining momentum in terms of the campaign, diba? Kasi even in areas where VP Lenny didn't win in 2016, she's also drawing crowds, and even kahit siya na nagugulat siya eh. But then suddenly you're faced with this other survey about satisfaction rating ata. Ito na parang 1 lang yung net satisfaction rating niya. That really caused a lot of frustration for people in her team kasi parang it's like a setback of sorts as well. And so they're also trying to wrap their heads around that. And I think this is also an effect of the 6 years of disinformation against VP Lenny that, it's really going to be the biggest challenge of her campaign kasi it's not so much as people don't know her. Like in 2016, ang problema ngayon kasi kilala siya ng tao but many of them think that she hasn't done anything, or all she has done is just criticize the government. And I think that one net satisfaction rating is a reflection of that, and that is also a reflection of how strong the Duterte administration still is in terms of yung perception ng mga botante dun sa gobyerno.
I can go
So-
next, Pia. Go.
After VP Robredo sa Pulse kasi, yung nag-third tsaka fourth place, tied sila si Senator Manny Pacquiao and si Manila Mayor Isko Moreno. They're both 8% dun sa Pulse Asia. So, siguro we can do that in that order, no? And then maybe at the end of it, si Unity Team Representative Bea Cupin to explain the frontrunners' morale. pero para kay Isko, so funny thing, siguro the days leading up to the release of Pulse Asia, meron na sila mga press release about other surveys done. Like, example, they always talk about yung Tangere survey, which is a mobile, they survey using mobile phone, so hindi siya face-to-face, I believe. And dun sa kinalabasan ng survey na yun, very, very favorable to Isko. Although, dominant pa rin si Marcos sa survey nila, Isko was number 2, not Lenny. And apparently, the survey also asked about the performance of the candidates sa mga debates. And according to the respondents ng Tangere, best performing daw si Isko Moreno. So, siguro after a few days, they were maybe conditioning the people or their supporters to think na we're doing well, we're going up, and then biglang boom, Pulse Asia 8%. Not that much of a difference. Actually, I don't think much of a difference from the December results. And so the very next day, nagpatawag ng press con yung camp ni Isko to say that this did not capture the debate and the interviews like the way CVP Robredo's camp did. So definitely may moral element, di ba? Na in a way, they're also trying to
Yeah.
tell the supporters na wait lang, okay lang yan, hinahon kayo, wala nothing to worry about, kasi ganyan-ganyan. So, very understandable na ginagawa nila yun, di ba? And yun, yung results kasi parang, totoo naman na parang the week it was conducted, diba? Hindi nga nag-take hold pa yung debate. So, may point rin naman sila. But at the same time, no, I think naman they're still really looking at the numbers and taking it seriously, except that they have to have a front-facing na parang hindi sila titinag, na very look at the bright side. So, Fico, yun yung kind of the way they're handling the psychological impact of those surveys. How about si Senator Pacquiao? Paano naman yung kanyang approach dun sa survey results? Aika.
Sorry. Si Senator Pacquiao actually same lang naman yung response niya, no, when it comes to the surveys na tuloy ang laban, we're not unfazed by the results, no. If you look at the Pulse Asia survey noong December tsaka January, parang same lang yung numbers niya. But pag tinignan mo yung regions, kasi di ba meron silang, you can see kung ano yung mga island groups, kung ano yung, kung ilang percent sila doon. And actually, si Senator Pacquiao, tumaas siya, no, tumaas pa siya sa Visayas and Mindanao areas. So, nung January, parang naging, ito, I'm looking at it right now. So, Pacquiao basically, naging 18 yung kanyang number sa Visayas, and sa Mindanao, naging 13, up from, yung dating 15 sa Visayas area, no. So basically tumaas siya. And then pagdating sa poor, doon mo talaga makikita na mas solid, no, yung support kay Senator Pacquiao for his candidacy. And tumaas siya to 20% from parang mga less than that. So tumaas siya sa Vismin tsaka sa among the classes. So kaya mararamdaman mo talaga even when he brings himself kapag mga interviews ganyan na he knows na at least in a way merong tumataas sa support sa kanya. So parang ano pa rin siya, tawag dito. He's very confident pa rin na he can work his way up. Yun.
And I think in 5th place si Senator Panfilo Lacson. Kamusta naman yung kanilang response sa survey?
Nakwento ko na rin last week, di ba, na parang may mga nag-leak na surveys and tinanong na rin natin yung kanilang moral and handa na siyang matalo, di ba? Yun din sabi ko. At sabi niya pwedeng hindi handa ang electorate sa kanila. At pareho pa rin, consistent naman ang ating lolo, si Senator Panfilo Lacson. Ano ba, yung kanina, naglabas siya ng frustration niya, and that's rare for Senator Lacson. Usually level-headed siya. Kasi isa't kalahating oras yung meet the press namin kanina. And usually, she sticks to the standard answers na, okay, ito nga, pwede kami matalo, prinsipyo, maniniwala sila sa amin. Pero nung bandang huli, kasi paulit-ulit namin tinatanong, mabutit paulit-ulit siya tinanong, lumabas yung totoo niyang nararamdaman at sabi niya frustrated siya, ayaw niya maniwala na 4% lang siya. Tapos sabi niya, hindi siya naniniwala na 2% lang siya sa NCR. Sabi niya, ang nararamdaman niya ay labas pa sa surveys. Ramdam niya na merong suporta na mas mataas pa sa nakikita niya sa mga papel ng surveys. Pero sinabi rin naman niya, tanggap din naman niya, na itong mga surveys ay credible din. Kasi we have to remember, ilang taon na rin naman tumatakbo to si Senator Lacson at ilang beses na niya tinitingnan tong mga guiding surveys na to. Kaya sabi niya, pwedeng guide pa rin to, tinitingnan natin pa rin ito, pero ibang nararamdaman ko. Kaya umaasa pa rin siyang tumaas ang kanyang ratings. Ang kanyang inaasahan talaga ay tumaas ang kanyang ratings through good interviews. At nakita naman natin to, lagi siyang handa sa PowerPoint presentations niya, sumagot kay Jessica Soho, nakatanggap siya ng mga praises dito at alam niya to. Kaso ayun, medyo na-discourage siya na despite the praised performance, mukhang stagnant ang kanyang statistics, laging single digit siya. So inaasahan niya na mas tumaas pa ang kanyang survey ratings.
And si Leody de Guzman, dun sa January survey, no, 0.02% yung kanyang voter preference. So, how did his team take it, Jairo?
Mm-mm.
Tumaas
Si
siya.
Leody naman, yung Tumaas siya
Medyo.
kasi I think 0.004 siya before. Like
Oh.
halos ano lang,
Mm.
statistically small. Si Leody kasi, medyo tanggap nila na sa unang mga buwan ng campaign period ay parang less than 1 yung kanilang statistics, yung kanilang voting preference na nakuha. So base dun sa statement nila, ang sabi nila, parang medyo tanggap naman nila so that they will do their ano na lang daw, their best to reach out to people para makapag-campaign pa sila. Isa sa mga highlight dun sa sinabi niya ay parang basta daw mabigyan pa daw ng pagkakataon si Calyodi on television shows, on interviews na malahad daw yung plataforma niya, gaganda pa daw yung numbers niya. He also mentioned na he will reach out to provinces, to other places na mga liblib para ano daw, para makuha din yung mga boto ng tao. Sabi niya din, hindi lang niya goal na makuha yung respeto ng mga tao. Goal niya din daw makuha yung boto nila. So, after kasi nung KBP event, after um, nung nag-live siya sa Jessica Soho interviews and the most recently itong SMNI interview, medyo pinag-usapan si Calyodi sa Facebook and sa Twitter. So dati kasi sa echo chamber ko, sa feed ko sa both Facebook and Twitter, hindi siya masyado pinag-uusapan. But now, there are people that I know that who talk about him na. So medyo nakikilala siya ng konti and he acknowledges naman na kailangan pa nilang i-improve yung image niya. Ang problem lang though, ikukumpara mo kasi yung sorties niya to other presidential candidates, hindi kasi ganun kadalas, hindi ganun karami. Saka I think dahil nagsa-start pa lang din yung kanyang mga staff sa ganitong bagay, medyo kailangan pa nilang iayos yung, how do I put it? Kailangan pa nilang iayos yung kanilang campaign strategy and yung mga processes kasi minsan nagkaka-problem yung media covering Calyodi kasi bigla-bigla na lang sila magbibigay ng sked na parang, okay, parang good morning guys, may interview si Calyodi ng ganitong oras. Eh di ba usually, at least day before or weeks before, di ba? Para may notice na parang naaayos siya ng media. And yun yung nagiging problem so far until now, until kahapon, doon sa Viber group namin pinag-uusapan yun na they also need to improve their strategy on that. And note ko lang din, yung Pulse Asia and SWS, legitimate survey sila kasi tayong mga graduate ng social sciences or applied social science, naniniwala tayo sa research at ang statistics nun ay nakabase sa tamang sampling survey at sampling technique. Kaya naman, yung mga results nun ay statistically correct. So, accurate po sila. And even our candidates that we cover, they believe in Pulse Asia and SWS and other related poll companies. Ayan.
Si Marcos naman and Sara Duterte, obviously very dominant. I think comparing yung December to January,
Yeah.
Marcos like increased across the board, no? Di ba,
Parang
Bea? So,
his only
nangyari?
loss is Balance Luzon, if I'm not mistaken. Or, oh no, sorry, NCR. I think he lost in NCR. But
Yeah, a
very,
bit, a bit.
but just a bit, right? But he gained almost everywhere. Balance Luzon, Visayas, Mindanao. So, habang nagkukwento kayo kanina, iniisip ko nga sa lahat ng kandidato, yung sobrang paniwalang-paniwala ngayon sa survey firm. Syempre, Unity. And in fact, hindi lang na natutuwa sila. It's become a main talk point in the rallies also. Kasi parang, kumbaga, kasi may usual assertions sa Unity team, di ba na? Again, parang all our stories reflect this na walang clear na platform for their plans. Should they win as president and vice president, it's always unity. Na kung baga, aasenso tayo kung may unity, we will all come together under President Marcos Jr., ganun. Pero parang recently, dumadagdag na sa talk point nila is, nangunguna sila sa lahat ng surveys, hindi lang Pulse Asia, SWS, pati Laylo, binabanggit nila. Pero napansin ko nga, they always emphasize the three. Of course, Marcos leads in other surveys, pero they always make it a point to emphasize the three, kumbaga, major survey firms in the Philippines. And I think the explanation for this is simple. Parang, to use a life sports metaphor, everybody loves a winner, nobody loves a loser. So parang, di ba, parang it's an easy draw na sali ka na sa amin kasi we're winning, we're projected to win this race. So yun, I don't know if there's anything else to add to that, but yeah, parang that's a major thing. And siguro to add to what you were saying kanina, no, na in public, you'll hear the campaigns and the candidates like not appeasing siguro, but reassuring their supporters na it's okay. Ganito yung dahilan kung bakit parang tila buaba or parang hindi umaakit yung kandidato natin. But you can be sure that behind the scenes, in the boardrooms of their HQs, kung hindi nagpapanik, hindi na nakakatulog yung mga campaign strategists, yung mga poll officers. May nakausap ako na isang source recently na tinanong ko kamusta. Hindi ko na sabihin kung anong kampo siya, pero you'll get the impression kung saan siya galing. Hindi siya unity. Parang after daw lumabas yung resulta ng Pulse Asia, parang nag-shut out muna siya sa mundo. Natulog muna siya at nagnilay-nilay. Tapos pagising niya, sige, laban tayo ulit, kaya pa to. So may epekto rin yan. But the campaign strategy shouldn't be in denial. In fact, yun nga, motivation yun or
Yes.
pang fuel dapat. Kasi wala parang kumbaga denying the numbers won't make you gain numbers. So, yeah.
Naalala ko,
sorry.
kinuwento ko rin ni Lito Banayo, who used to work sa campaign ni Duterte, na remember the time he cursed the Pope?
Yeah.
Grabe, kasi bakit na yung numbers niya eh. Tapos biglang nung kinurse niya, parang 8-point drop or something.
Nagpalpitate ba?
Yeah, as in, behind the scenes talagang panic mode sila. So yeah, parang it really goes to show that no matter where you are sa survey, diba, you have to believe in these numbers somehow. So which brings me to my next point na parang si Isko kasi, pag sinasabi niya, pag tinatanong siya about yung survey and how he's lagging behind, palagi yung sinasabi, kumukuha ako ng lakas dun sa tao sa kalye, sa mga motorcade niya, yung warm bodies. So, sa inyo ba, parang how well attended are the events of your candidates? Kasi si Isko, have to say na usually naman, well attended yung mga town hall niya, like at least half of the venue is full. Yung mga motorcades niya talagang full of screaming women, like kids chasing the motorcades, and talagang may show of love naman and warmth talaga to Isko. So that's really making him feel na, no, the surveys, wala yan, dito ako sa tao, ganyan-ganyan. So, ewan ko kung ganun din yung ba yung nakita niyo on the ground. Like, are you seeing parang warm bodies flocking to your candidates?
I think I'll go last again.
I definitely see that in the Robredo Pangilinan tandem. So the last sortie of theirs that I covered was in Quezon City. At mahina doon si Leni Robredo, natalo siya doon ni Marcos noong 2016. Panalo din si Duterte doon for president. So it's really an electorate that that didn't support, the Robredo campaign from 2016. So mahina siya. Tapos may local factor pa sa Quezon City because wala pang ini-endorso na presidential candidate si Mayor Joy Belmonte, and of course we know her vice mayoral candidate, yung incumbent niya, si Gian Soto, ay anak ni Senate President Tito Soto. So obviously, Gian Soto is backing Senator Panfilo Lacson for president. Pero ang kaaway ni Joy Belmonte sa pagka-mayor sa 2022, si Mike Defensor, is backing Marcos. So medyo dehado si Leni Robredo sa Quezon City, but syempre pinag-uusapan talaga yung Pink Sunday Rally kasi madami siya talaga. Hirap na hirap kaming mag-tweet kasi ang daming tao. And so it wasn't also surprising that there was a statement from the QCLGU after about COVID protocols that were not followed. But it's really intense. It was thousands, if thousands talaga yung pumunta doon. And I've observed the same thing with the crowds that VP Lenny has been drawing. And I think they're able to endure kahit yung init kasi yung iba doon parang common pattern. Siyempre, pupunta sila dun sa venue 8 o'clock ng umaga, tas makakarating na si VP Lenny dun tanghali na. Kasi once napag-usapan natin to before, once na ma-delay yung unang event, either because maraming nangyayari, or there's an extra meeting or whatever, madedelay yun lahat. But when she comes, they're also excited, and may mga pasayaw-sayaw pa. There's always some member of the LGBT community in full costume na pink, o kaya talagang very in drag. So parang it's really very palpable. So naiintindihan ko din tuloy yung mga supporters why they don't want to believe the surveys, because they can see it, for themselves that may mga tao. But hindi pa rin yun. It really won't capture the entire electorate of that particular area. So pero I think we also need to point out that the election is also a battle of perception. That's why candidates often like to release pictures of the crowd, aerial shots, drone shots. Kasi ang mga Pilipino may tendency yan na sige, lalo na kapag unsure pa sa kandidato, parang sige dito na lang ako kay kandidato B kasi mas madaming crowd dun sa sorties niya compared to kandidato A. So very important yet kung ikaw ay campaign strategist is to also be able to, kahit dehado ka sa numbers, kailangan malabanan nyo yan sa narrative na parang, okay, mapapa kami sa numbers, pero tingnan mo yung crowd, ang dami-dami. So, and then that's part of it. It's like a whole of campaign, whole of nation, whatever approach, na kailangan labanan mo din yung perceptions to influence the way the Filipino electorate would think.
To add lang to what Mara said, dapat, kasi hindi ako news reporter noong 2019. Parang sobrang crucial na ngayon sa campaign yung drone shot, no, yung aerial shot. Kasi parang noong 2016, wala namang may pake yun, except for Duterte. I remember in 2016, it was the
Meeting
Duterte
the
camp
advantage.
that always released like drone, lalo na nung towards the end, di ba? Nung talagang drawer na
Kasi
siya
may
ng
flag
Manila.
kasi. Di ba may flag na
Intense.
parang people forming a flag, tapos kita from above. Yeah.
Kasi, well, I mean, given naman din na technology, dati kasi siguro mas mahal ang drone equipment. Siguro ngayon mas mura na siya, so more teams can afford it. Pero parang ngayon, parang hindi complete kung wala kang wide or drone shot ng event mo. Parang to cap off your, So parang to add lang din to what Mara said na, absolutely, like yun nga, even if your numbers are low, parang it's a way of rallying. Kasi yun nga, people don't want to pick a loser. They want to be on the winning side. And like, seeing a crowd of people in pink, in red, in blue, in orange, or whatever color there is, diba? Yellow, wala na palang yellow ngayon. Diba, parang to see that crowd of like one color, parang, okay, baka okay. Tapos, syempre may voters din who will pick on who will win. Right?
Yes.
Parang sino yung hindi masasayang yung vote ko, quote. I know people disagree with that, but like, some people think that way. And that's an easy way to convince the undecided or people who do vote that way. Sorry. Anyway, go ahead.
Pero interesting yung point at which, kasi before a winner is a winner, he's a loser, di ba? I mean, dehado siya. So what is the tipping point where a voter decides to go for this candidate kahit hindi siya yung front runner, di ba? Parang may conversion factor na they have to hit that sweet spot in voters eh. And which brings me to my next question. Ano yung naririnig yung strategies from, I don't know, like groups or experts for your candidate to win? Kasi, di ba, right now it's starting the campaign season, but you can already see, di ba, the lay of the land. Marcos is dominant, and these people are strong in Bicol. Like si Lenny, si Isko, strong in NCR kasi siya yung second place after Bongbong Marcos. So, given na iting lay of the land, ano yung naririnig nyo from your sources or whoever on what your candidate should do to win? And actually, maybe we can start with Bea kasi si Bea, nakapag-cover siya ng isang very interesting ADR strat-based forum about a survey commission. So, sige, Bea, ano yung narinig mo doon?
Halo-halo to ng surveys kasi, okay, to clarify lang, this was a closed-door briefing and that hindi siya broadcast. Pero media were invited, as far as I understand, representatives from the political camps were also invited. I think may iba pang mga groups na invited to the briefing. So, siguro I'll start with a bit on the tendency of voters to change their minds. Parang my notebook is kind of far, pero parang if I recall, may 10% of voters who most likely will only decide closer to election day, parang the week or days leading to the election day. Consistent rin to with exit polls that they held in 2016, if I'm not mistaken. Although alam ko hindi kasi ako statistician, hindi ko alam yung science of taking and preparing surveys, no. Pero parang alam ko, if I recall correctly, they noted a mistake in exit polls din. Pero parang yun yung consistent na people a lot of people actually do decide last minute. Pero may bigger percentage na kung baga hindi na magbabago yung utak nila leading into parang between the date the survey was taken and election. So anyway, yung recommendation sa candidates, yun nga, na parang siguro to summarize, parang given the projections of the numbers na, parang dalawa yung possibilities, either landslide for Marcos or very tight race, which doesn't really, I mean, malamang yun yung possibilities, right? Like either it's tight or either it's a landslide for Marcos Jr. who is currently leading the surveys. So, yung interesting dito, chinat ko na rin to sa mga other campaign reporters na yung mga insights from the briefing. Parang one of the insights was, one emphasis that they made was creating momentum. So, anong ibig sabihin nito? Yun nga, parang mag-start ka sa isang lugar kung saan ka malakas naturally. And then from there, the idea is to make that momentum spill over. So, tatlo lang yung natandaan ko na suggestions, na recommendations from the Institute nga. Una kay Isko Moreno, Mayor Isko, was to create momentum in NCR kasi currently nga si Bongbong Marcos yung leading sa NCR if I'm not mistaken. So the suggestion was for him to create momentum and then from that you spill out into the nearby regions na vote rich din naman. And then for Leni Robredo, Vice President Leni Robredo, it was to basically replicate what she did in 2016. Nagsimula siya sa kanyang solid voter base sa Bicol. And then from there, you go to the nearby regions and provinces na marami-raming boto rin. And then for Manny Pacquiao, the suggestion was to visit more yung mga Bisaya-speaking na areas kasi siya lang ba yung Bisaya na kandidato? Siya lang, no? Yeah, he's the only presidential candidate who's beside tama nga no. So yun yung wala, I don't recall a suggestion for Senator Ping Lacson during the briefing. So yung isang linya din or isang insight na that struck me was that yung parang the campaign can't be blanket. It has to be very targeted. Like you have to be very strategic about where you go. Why you're going, how often you'll go. Siguro for context lang, sorry, ang haba na lang sinasabi ko na, pero for context din, 2016, Mar Rojas and Leni Robredo, 3 or 4 times sila bumalik-balik ng Cebu province and Cebu City. Right? And that's kind of weird kasi you only have 3 months but you spend so much time in those in one area. Tapos hindi yung one day lang, normally parang 2 days, 3 days sila each stop. So that's because Cebu was considered, and until now it is considered, province and city, it's considered a crucial spot in the elections. Kasi ang laki ng voting population, tapos parang, although they have a tendency to vote, historically, they used to vote for LP, parang yellow ang Cebu, quote-unquote, but in 2016, they voted for Duterte, the Bisaya candidate, during that election. So, yeah.
O, si Isko, today, first time niya mag-Northern Luzon. So, surprising yun kasi, syempre, Marcos territory. But it makes sense because he obviously, yung sinabi nga niya kanina sa ambush interview, kahit makakuha lang siya ng onting votes, alam naman niya hindi niya matadominate, mananalo yung Northern Luzon. Pero even just a little bit. And that's a strategy, right? That a lot of candidates do. Na parang get a little bit from where you're weak. Basta get something. Basta don't go away with zero. Kasi kailangan mo pa rin yun kahit paano eh. So yun yung ginagawa ni Isko. And it's true na nung first days of the campaign period, he did start in Metro Manila. So yung strategy na yan is, I think, you can see it in his strategy na on the ground. He hit Quezon City, Pasay, Malabon, Navotas. Talagang maraming people who showed up in the streets for him. 23% naman siya talaga sa Metro Manila. And then after that, he followed it with Visayas. And even if hindi siya technically like born in Visayas, he's making an argument na he's a Visayan candidate kasi his 2 late parents are from Visayas. So, di ba, Alan Samar, Northern Samar, tsaka yung si Joaquin Dumagoso came from Panay Island. So, meron siyang legit naman. In fact, the local officials embraced him na Waraynon siya, son of a Waraynon. So, medyo nagpe-pay off naman yung kanyang, angling using his family connections, which is a very legitimate, di ba, like, strategy we use, right? Blood relations na kung yung kaanak mo, ganyan-ganyan. So, yun. Do you see your candidates, may specific strategy ba sila na ginagawa sa on-the-ground campaigning na like where they choose to go?
For Lenny naman, actually sinunod niya nga yung suggestion ng strat basis. So I don't know kung nagkataon lang or nag-uusap na sila before, but obviously she started the official campaign period in Bicol where she is strongest. And then according to her campaign manager, former Senator Bam Aquino, the next stops kasi nila, it's a mix of areas where she is strong, and also areas where she lost in 2016 pero strong ang volunteer base, ang mga volunteers doon. So again, this follows the usual campaign tactic na to project strength and to secure your base. Yun yung ginagawa ni VP Lenny. And next week, nako, sobrang lagari yung campaign reporters covering her because she's gonna be around. In-announce na naman niya to kanina, so she's gonna go to Mindanao, sa Cagayan de Oro area, and we know na may mga local politicians who have been supporting her there, and the campaigns that are very energetic for her. She's also going to Cebu, and then she's going to return again to Iloilo, which we know has been, one of the provinces talaga na antindi ng suporta kay Leni Robredo. She has the backing of Iloilo City Mayor Jerry Trias and the governor of Iloilo province. And when she was there pre-campaign, 2 days yon, intense, nagulat din talaga siya dun sa support sa kanya. So kind of like similar to Isko, what Leni Robredo is doing is hindi lang niya pinupuntahan yung mga lugar na malakas siya, pinupuntahan niya din yung mga lugar na they believe they have a higher chance of getting the swing votes. So the approach is really kailangan mabawasan yung gap between her and Marcos Jr. And their goal obviously is malakihan yung gap between her and Isko Moreno and Manny Pacquiao and Ping Lacson. And we will see if that strategy will work in the coming days or weeks, more of like the next weeks.
Isa rin palang dagdag ko lang. From hindi naman to secret na data actually, pero na parang na-summarize lang ng strat-base at nilinis na yung data. So, we always hear that the youth will comprise a huge chunk of voters in 2022. Pero ito yung data nila, 18 to 44 years old, that's 49% of the electorate. That means almost half of the electorate did not experience martial law, or hindi sila old enough to remember the People Power Revolution. So isang parang malaking factor din 'yun na kung baga iba yung kinamulatan ng electorate mo ngayon. Kasi parang tayo. Yung generation natin, 'di ba? We were born na okay na yung like more or less the rebuilding of democracy, or for the later 90s siguro medyo nag-stabilize na ng kaunti. So parang isang factor din 'yun. And then they do expect practically the usual turnout, despite the fact na there's still COVID-19. Parang yun yung lumabas sa survey. Urban-rural, 49-51, so split in half. And then, yeah. And siguro later we can just touch a little bit on ano bang top concerns ng voters. Anyway, continue guys.
Yun. Yung kay Leody naman, as compared to other candidates, si Leody kasi hindi siya so far baka makancel ako, pero hindi siya so far on-ground campaigning, mas ni-utilize niya yung social media and then yung mga media interviews. For example, parang sobrang dalas niya, like last week and this week, para majority sa mga activities niya doon sa thread namin ay nakafocus sa interviews. So parang in a day, meron siyang 2 interviews. Parang hindi naubusan yung araw na wala siyang media interview. Kasi I think it's actually part of their campaign strategy to make Calio din known to the voters, especially that hindi naman talaga siya ganong kilala compared to his opponents. And other strategy na ginamit niya din to prove that claim is during the SMNI debate, di ba? Parang people were really expecting for him to go like parang todo bigay against Bongbong Marcos, 'di ba? Pero what he did was surprisingly, syempre ako hindi na-surprise kasi sinabi nun sa amin or in-announce naman beforehand. Pero yun lang, hindi nagulat yung mga tao na hindi niya inattack si Marcos, or basically hindi niya ginisa, in other words. Like what Cayetano did, former Senator Alan Peter Cayetano did in 2016 debates with Bongbong Marcos. Parang ganun in-expect ng mga tao, especially that si Calio di talaga yung known na opposition or anti-Marcos, anti-Duterte candidate who attended the SMNI debate. I think for some people, they said it's a missed opportunity for Leody to prove his anti-Marcos stance. But on the other side of the story naman, I think gusto kasi nila mag-focus dun sa platform. At iyon naman yung pinapakita nila iyon yung projection nila in the from last week and this week na parang, okay, pakita muna natin yung platform natin, pakilala muna natin si Calyodi. Kasi parang, siguro, sa tingin nila tapos na yung mga oras na kailangan tirahin nila ng tirahin si Marcos and Duterte as compared to the early years of their campaign. Pero meron silang subtle na ginawa though no SMNI debate. Si Aladdin Panganiban, si Ala Panganiban, he was the executive assistant ni Calyodi and also the MRO. So nagpicture siya kay Bongbong Marcos with the shirt, yung Never Again shirt. So it was actually MRO yun ni Calyodi. It was Never Again shirt. So para yun yung subtle message naman nila. And nag-work naman I think because they got people talking about that post and that picture kasi nag-viral siya in almost platforms, both in Twitter and Facebook.
I can talk about Lacson and Soto, yung kanila rin. I think nagre-reflect siya sa sinabi rin ni Bea kanina na maayos na bumubuelo sila sa kanilang mga historically strong areas. And nakita natin ito sa kanilang launch areas. Una sa Cavite for Lacson, home ground niya. And then si Senator Soto naman, home ground din niya ang Quezon City. Hindi niya hometown, pero doon talaga nagsimula ang kanyang political career. At tinitingnan ko kanina yung schedule ng ating mga senators. Tama nga, nagre-reflect din yung building of momentum. So, bebuelo sila muna sa Baguio tomorrow. Papakita sila doon and that's also a battleground, a home ground for Lacson kasi doon siya graduate ng PMA, ilang taon siya doon, may roots siya doon. And then from there, bebuelo sa taas, pupunta sa baba, pupunta sila sa 4A, sa Laguna, Batangas, Quezon, and then it's all south from there. Pupunta sa Bicol and then sa Cebu. So talagang literally bumuelo sa taas and then pupunta sa baba, hoping na tumaas yung kanilang ratings.
Hello. So, ako naman kay Senator Pacquiao, actually, we were told that susimulan niya sa, kung ganun kila Lacson, dapat sabi niya, simulan nila sa Mindanao. Kasi siya lang yung nag-iisang candidate na tumakbo sa Mindanao, di ba? I mean, na tumakbo sa Mindanao, tapos nag-proclamation rally sa Mindanao. So, we were told na simulan muna sa Mindanao and then Visayas. But, nung nag-sortie na siya, actually, after February 8, nagsarangani siya eh. Yun, tapos the following days, wala na siyang sortie. Maliban dun sa mga interviews niya, media interviews, tapos yung recorded na other interviews with FOCUP, etc., etc. So for a few days, wala siyang sortie, no? Pero nung nagkaroon na siyang sortie, magpunta siya sa Rizal, tapos meron din sa ibang areas, based sa kanyang tentative schedules, na sa Central Luzon, tsaka sa Southern Luzon. So, this was after, natuloy pa rin itong schedule, even if nalabas na yung Pulse Asia survey. And as Bea mentioned nga earlier, di ba, yung sabi dun sa ADR, na parang it would have been better if Pacquiao goes around Vismin areas. But nakikita ko dito sa strategy nila that they are doing right now, mas nagpo-focus sila sa mga areas sa talo sila. Kasi actually dun sa mga ibang areas, di ba, sinasabi na nga malakas sila sa Vismin. But yung mga pupuntahan niya in the next few days, Rizal, Rizal, Laguna, etc., etc. Parang ito yung mga vote-rich areas na gusto niya talagang tignan. And if you look at the surveys, may kita mo na si Senator Pacquiao, hindi siya, mababa siya doon. Kung hindi mababa, as in parang insignificant yung number niya na doon, para even less than 1%. So mukhang yun yung naging strategy nila. So I think we're yet to see if they will actually follow yung sinasabi ng ADR Institute na dapat mag-focus siya sa Vismin areas. Kasi so far nakita natin, puro Luzon talaga yung pinupuntahan niya. Hindi pa rin natin nakikita kung pupunta na siya ng Solid North o kaya ng Bicol areas. So ito yung mga baluarte ng kalaban niya. Hindi pa natin nakikita kung pupunta siya doon dahil so far tentative pa nga yung schedule niya. Siguro dagdag ko lang din doon sa sinabi ko kanina about him getting higher percentages sa among the poor and investment areas. I think siguro we have to remember na itong candidates, hindi naman talaga sila nag-start mangampanya ng February 8 eh. 'Di ba? Nag-start na rin silang umikot or tinatawag nilang listening tour or whatsoever. So nag-iikot na talaga sila even before they launch their campaigns and after that, no. So si Senator Pacquiao, I think nag-work din yung kasi before the campaign he keeps on giving money. So meron siyang ayuda sa mga tao. So I think nag-work din yun in his case. So titingnan natin kung in the following months ano yung magiging performance niya in the surveys, and if kung magbabago siya ng strategy given that merong mga ganitong recommendations from respected institutions.
So, yung unit team naman, syempre yung kick-off nila, sila yung naiba, di ba? Sila yung hindi nag-kick-off sa hometown, hindi nag-kick-off sa Baluarte. Kasi show of force yun. Na kami, parang kung baga, hindi kami yung kailangan pumunta sa Baluarte namin. Kasi ang Baluarte namin ay kung saan kami pumunta. Parang ganun yung gusto nilang i-project dun sa unit team kick-off. So, after nung kick-off na yun, parang medyo naghiwalay muna sila ng konti. Parang there was a several sorties in NCR. And then parang nag-converge ulit sila ngayon. Kaya wala si Lian sa episode na to kasi she's in Ilocos-Ilocandia, where the two of them are campaigning. And then I believe soon they'll be going to Western Visayas, which is interesting kasi historically that is yellow. It's a liberal party powerhouse, no? And then after that, weeks from now naman, I think they will converge again in Davao City, obviously, where Sara Duterte is mayor. Gusto ko lang din idagdag dito, no, na one thing that, I mean, should be obvious, but people it might need spelling out. Ground campaigning is very expensive. Like, you have no, like, kasi when the candidate goes there, it's not just the candidate. You have the security team who goes there a week before. You have the poll team who goes there weeks before to talk to local candidates, to local leaders, ganun. Sobrang mahal nun. Kasi, di ba, parang lahat ng airfare, some of the candidates pa use private jets for both security and to save on time. So, intense na logistics yan. Sobrang mahal. Siguro to add din sa reason na bakit si Calyodi siguro hindi umiikot ng sorties na physical sorties, pressing flesh. Kasi at the end of the day, yun pa rin yung best way to campaign. And no matter how social media savvy you are, you still need to press flesh kasi people remember when you visit them. In your town or in your city, it's very expensive. It's very prohibitive. And I think that's one thing he raised nung SMNI debate na napakamahal magkampanya dito sa in the Philippines. So yun, parang yung sa unit team, parang so far, but I'm not sure if they'll continue this. Parang they separate, so they do their own campaigning kasi medyo iba din yung strengths at weaknesses nila at this point siguro, although dominant sila both in their respective positions. Pero so they split up, which is actually smart because you cover more ground. Because if Marcos Jr. campaigns somewhere, he can campaign for Sara Duterte, and then when Sara campaigns somewhere, she can campaign for Marcos Jr. So it's actually much more. Isa din palang insight. Sorry, ang dami kong naaalala ng mga insight is that people used to assume na kung baga Sara will carry BBM. Kasi ganun usually yun, di ba, sa tandem, para mas may malakas, may hindi gaano kalakas. So yung mas malakas yung bibit-bit sa weaker candidate or sa hindi masyadong kilalang candidate. Pero it turns out, based on the latest na surveys, mas malakas pala si BBM. So, happy yun for them. Kasi walang, di ba, walang buhatan na kailangan gawin. Parang hindi kailangan na i-introduce ni Sara si BBM kung sino-sino. Kasi parang mataas na rin pala siya doon. So, the strategy is to, in fairness to them, I think that's one thing, they seem to be campaigning as if they aren't the survey frontrunners. And by that, I mean, masipag pa rin, grabe yung ikot nila. Which, well, it doesn't bode well for the other candidates, I guess. No? They're not being complacent. And we know that leading candidates who turn complacent, they lose. So,
isang major impactful product that the surveys have given the campaign period and the way it's really shaped it so far is the fact that we even have a front runner. I mean, imagine kung walang surveys at all, we would never know who is leading, and it would be a guessing game, and maybe the perception war would be a little bit more even. But diba, we know who's dominant. And so yung question ko, ano yung sinabi ng Stratbase and even other observers on how the laggers, yung mga naglalag behind the surveys, should be treating the front runner? Should they be targeting them? Should they be insulting them or criticizing them? I mean, paano mo i-handle yung sobrang ka-dominant na unit team, Duterte Marcos tandem? Kasi for my candidate, si Isko, hindi siya, surprisingly soft siya. Like, today, he was in La Union, Northern Luzon, so Marcos territory. You'd expect na, yes, medyo mas cautious siya siguro. But at the same time, diba, parang I also heard findings na to be able to win against Marcos, si Isko has to contrast himself to Marcos and not just talk about his achievements. Hindi daw enough yun eh. I think this is from Stratbase nga, Bea, di ba? Yung one of your notes, na kailangan i-contrast mo yung sarili mo. So you really have to directly engage BBM and mention him and, like compare yourself. So si Isko, napansin ko, he doesn't really mention Marcos in the same line as criticism na very direct. Like the most siguro he would say is he's one of the elitist politicians na parang representative of exclusive politics in the Philippines na gusto niyang i-upend. Pero never like talagang full frontal insult. Walang ganun. Pero yung supporters niya, yun yung talagang bumabanat sila. So meron pang video na parang comparing achievements of Isko and the fact that si Marcos was not a very prolific like lawmaker or even local government official. And then yung blogger na si Banat Bay who used to be Duterte diehard supporter is now pro Isko and talagang todo yung kanyang criticisms and mga banat against Marcos. And I even remember before the official campaign period yung staff yung mga Action Demokratiko staff and leaders were even saying, di ba, parang Marcos is the Forbes kid who cheated. Parang nangopia lang siya dun sa Tondo Boy paper kasi diba si Isko siya nagsabi na parang cut fuel tax by 50%, tapos parang Marcos issued a statement similar to that. So parang may ganung parang putting them up against each other, weighing them against each other. So ano bang sinasabi ng mga tao about what your candidates should do? Like, I mean, given their own unique backgrounds and track record.
I think I'll go last na lang. So kayo muna.
I can start na rin for after Pia. For Lacson and Soto, kasi ano talaga I mean, we have to admit, madalas ng pakiramdam sa campaign room, parang elephant in the room talaga yung pagiging frontrunner ni BBM. Kasi parang bakit ang hirap banggitin ng pangalan niya? Bakit ang hirap din tanungin for reporters? Kasi alam natin na hindi nila binabanggit. And especially sa candidates ko na talagang gumawa sila ng pact na we will not mention the names of other candidates. At nagre-refer dito sa kanilang campaign. Pero ang lumalabas, it's like they're dancing around the name of BBM. Kasi yung thesis ng campaign ni Lacson, ang ganyang gusto sabihin ayaw ko sa magnanakaw, ayaw ko sa korap. Pero 'di ba, yung Marcos family, 'di ba, meron talagang history of stealing billions of pesos. Bakit hindi niya mabanggit? So, lumalabas yung strategy niya na hindi niya kayang pangalanan. Kanina tinanong ko kasi nagsalita si Senator Ping Lacson last week after the surveys initially was received by his team. Ang kanyang speech sobrang powerful against magnanakaw. Sabi niya, ang mga Pilipino ba handang mag-elect na naman ay sa magnanakaw? So, sino pa bang frontrunner, di ba? Si BBM, di ba? So, tinanong ko siya, can you name this person? Kasi parang it seems like you're suggesting na si BBM. Sabi niya, no, I'm not naming anyone. I'm just saying it in general. Yung mga pagnanakaw lang talaga, handa ba kayo magnakaw? So, lumalabas din talaga na ayaw nila ng negative campaigning, pero pahapyaw pa rin siya. And tama yung binanggit ni Pia at ni Bea na hindi sila mismo yung nagne-negative campaigning. It's more of the supporters. Binabasa ko yung mga comments. It's more of like, anti-Marcos, dito tayo kay Ping kasi siya yung malinis. So may ganun siyang paggalaw. Si Senate President Soto na mas malakas, hindi din siya masyadong nagsasalita. Talagang sumasayaw lang talaga sila na hindi nila babanggitin yung pangalan na ni Marcos. At patuloy at paulit-ulit din yung kanilang message na no to corruption. Pero yun nga, hindi nila babanggitin yung pangalan ng iba. Consistent naman.
Susugan ko lang yung kay Rambo, no? Kasi kaparehas din si Senator Pacquiao. Ganun din siya. He would never really address him directly or parang kung mapapansin mo nga yung mga sinasabi niya kasi kunwari pagtatanungan siya tungkol sa Marcos ill-gotten wealth, sasabihin niya, i-reiterate niya lang na parang I am against corruption. He will always find a way to bring it back to himself na kapag siya ay naging presidente, regardless of anong family name mo, regardless of whatever anong status mo or position mo in government, hindi ka niya palalagpasin. So parang ganun yung ginagawa ni Senator Pacquiao, no? And I think it's also because in general, I read this somewhere na in general some voters really tend to hate yung negative campaigning. So ayaw nila, in short, ayaw nila ng toxic. So gusto nila chill lang, happy vibes lang, 'di ba? So parang I think that's the reason why ina-assume ko lang naman na that's why they don't want to engage in negative campaigning. So aside from that, we also have to remember, no, at least for Senator Lacson and Senator Pacquiao, na colleague nila si Senator Amy Marcos sa Senado. So in a way, meron din silang ganung tinitignan na relationship, no? And even in the Senate naman, they really never talk behind. So yun nga, di ba? We have to remember in politics, di ba? Kung ano yung nag-work for them right now. Kung friends sila right now. Kung enemy sila later. So nothing really hindi siya ganoon, kulang siya sa punches in a way. So yun nga, so kailangan natin tingnan kung ano yung magiging strategy niya in the next in the upcoming, let's say ED's anniversary next week, no. So so far hindi pa rin ganoon kalakas on yung, or wala pa rin masyadong sipa yung mga statements niya, aside from kapag naging presidente siya, dapat i-implement yung mga dapat in-implement na ruling against the Marcoses. And yun nga, kasi meron siyang image na dapat siya, righteous siya. So parang ganun siya, Senator Pacquiao.
For
Si
Robredo,
Calio din-
obviously...
Ay.
Sige.
Go ahead, Mara. Sorry. Go ahead, Mara.
Sige. So for Robredo, obviously, Marcos is her bitter rival kasi 2016, after she defeated him in the vice presidential race, he filed an election case. He lost it, but the narrative that Robredo has cheated the elections, persisted for 5 years until the Supreme Court decided to junk Marcos's case. So, gigil si VP Lenny when it comes to Marcos, obviously, but ever since the official campaign period started, the messaging has always been focused on herself and the kind of clean, honest governance, inclusive leadership that she would bring to the table. Siguro may parang I've covered 2 rallies. Doon lang may pahapyaw about the attacks against her by the Marcoses, or may allusion, halimbawa nung proclamation rally niya, may allusion to the Taliano gold myth of the Marcoses, pero hindi siya diretso eh. So, much like the other candidates, there's also the understanding of VP Lenny in her campaign that, negative campaigning won't probably help her gain votes in the elections. And so ako personally, I think VP Lenny should just stick to the messaging that she's been doing on the ground. She's doing very well in her speeches, all on point. Kailangan lang talaga na consistent din yan with the ads that they will be airing in the coming months and the kind of groundwork that her lieutenants in different provinces, barangays will be doing. I don't know, maybe they can also explore if the strategy that they want her supporters, her volunteers to take is for them to be the ones attacking Marcos. Maybe they could pivot it not so much on the abuses of martial law and Marcos's lack of acknowledgement of the sins of martial law that he is benefiting from today, but more of highlighting, similar to what Isko is doing, contrasting the clean and efficient track record of Lenny Robredo as vice president to the absentee governor history of Marcos as a politician in Ilocos. Baka maybe they can try the tactic also, kasi baka yung martial law attacks or the martial law issues hindi siya magre-resound right now given how much saturated with pro-Marcos content ang ating social media at hindi talaga sila makaka-keep up doon.
Yung kay
Jairo. Ayun.
Yeah. Ayun. Yung kay Leody naman, although parang meron doon sila more sa pagpapakilala pa kay Leody ulit, kasi parang as compared to other candidates, nandun siya sa premature phase ng campaign kung saan introduction pa lang siya. So para siyang para siyang another senatorial ball na di pa nananalo on the national elections, papakilala. So nandun pa rin sila sa stage na yon, pero nagsistick pa rin naman sila sa narrative nila na wala silang sinasanto. In fact, kanina nga lang, I think 30 minutes ago, 40 minutes ago, nag-tweet ulit si Professor Walden, yung running mate ni Calyodi, attacking Ping Lacson, di ba? Parang kasi Ping earlier said never again to martial law, tapos biglang inatake ni Walden si Ping. Sabi niya parang said someone who has, record of killings during the martial law, parang kasi di ba soldier cup na nun si Senator Ping. So sila, ganun pa rin yung messaging nila, mananatili pa rin sila doon. Pero I think nag-work naman so far yung kanilang strategy to to utilize all possible platforms na binibigay sa kanila. And yeah, we have to acknowledge din na limited din talaga yung machinery nila and yung money nila to do on-ground campaigning or to do on-ground to meet their supporters on ground. So, let's see na lang kung ano pa yung mga gagawin ng strategy. But so far, I think it's working naman to their advantage.
So siguro kung nagtataka yung mga tao, bakit nga ba hindi nila kayang mang-away directly ng kalaban, no? Sa stage, sa speech, or wherever. Ito hindi to galing sa stat base, pero kumbaga truism to among campaign strategists. Filipino voters don't like it when candidates fight other candidates. Like sobrang turn off yun for them, like across the board. Parang a source told me before na parang kahit anong FGD ka pupunta, yung talaga yung common sentiment na ayaw nila yung nangaaway. So kung gusto mo ng mga away, dapat parang ano na yan, supporters mo na lang or feeling ko nga kahit kung spokesperson, hindi rin yun pwede kasi alter ego ng kandidato yun. So parang that also explains why a lot of candidates don't like kumbaga ayaw nila yung nanggigisa sila ng kalaban nila ng harap-harap. At saka parang ano din, parang counterintuitive din naman siya. Kasi bakit ka mambabanggit ng ibang tao? Eh, crowd mo na yon, moment mo na yon, tapos magde-name drop ka pa ng ibang family name, di ba? So parang binigyan mo pa ng exposure yung other candidates. So anyway, so siguro you don't talk about your enemies that way, right? You don't trash them in front of your supporters. So what do? You have to talk about the topics that the voters care about. And thankfully, there are surveys that teach us what voters care about. So shift to, pero I think the most recent one, hindi to public, but this was discussed during the briefing yesterday. Based on a January 19 to 24 Pulse Asia survey, economic issues yung top concerns ng voters. So we have inflation, number 1, workers' pay, number 2, poverty, number 3, yung isa-isang hindi economic issue, graft and, although pwede rin, makakount mo rin naman siya, graft and corruption is number 4, 5 is job creation. So voters are concerned about may job ba for them or will more jobs be available in the future? So what does this tell candidates or what should this tell candidates and their teams? Kailangan nila ma-contrast kung bakit sila ang makakatugon ng mga issues na yun. Diba? Parang when you contrast yourself to the front runner, you use, parang yun yung mag-guide sa'yo. Parang I'm the better person to turn our economy around. I'm the better person to guide the Philippines post-COVID-19. So parang those are things that candidates should, and I hope all the campaigns are looking at it. Kasi parang you can create your own talk points, you can create your own priorities, pero kung hindi siya swak sa anong concern ng electorate, wala rin mapupunta or walang magagawa yung pag-push mo ng talk points mo at ng parang areas of concern mo kung hindi siya swak. So that's one thing that we're gonna see because I'm sure most of the candidates will have access to the data from polls. Siyempre feeling ko may parsed out na version pa to, like sub-concerns pa ng mga voters, pero broad strokes yun yung 5 yun. So we have heard, and the irony is, former Senator Marcos Jr. hasn't really unveiled like a detailed plan for the economy. Parang yung narinig ko pa lang sa kanya is kailangan tumutok sa tourism, kailangan tumutok sa tourism, small to medium enterprises, you have to help them, internet connection. Parang yun pa lang yung mga sinasabi niya, wala pa siyang nilalatag na specific plan for the economy unlike the other candidates, and yet he's leading. So baka that's an opportunity for the other candidates to contrast na may plano kami sa economy. Di ba yun yung concern nyo? Di ba ito yung dahilan kung bakit nagtatrabaho kayo ng sobrang haba-haba, di ba? So yun, baka that's something that, not baka, I hope the campaigns are paying attention to that.
Yeah, kasi si Isko may 10-point bilis kilos, tapos si Manny Pacquiao 22-point. I don't know if VP Lenny has a something point, but they all have some like number, right, to show na we have like targets and like actual number crunching sila. So yeah, it boggles the mind.
Oh, there's an answer to that. And I shared this also. There's a story, I wrote a story about this also. Kasi yung perception is that kaya ni Marcos Jr. mag-deliver sa mga concerns na to. There's the story somewhere on Rappler na yung top na characteristics that people want to see in the next president, Marcos has it, based on a survey in October 2021 pa. Or Marcos has it based on the perception of those who were surveyed. So that probably answers the question. I don't know if that's satisfactory to people who are monitoring the elections, but that's a possible answer to it.
Okay, so that wraps up yung third episode ng Campaign Convos. Malayo pa ang campaign na to. We have like 80 days. And just to give you heads up, no, like we will be seeing the candidates going in different regions, in regions na hindi sila comfortable, but they'll be visiting nonetheless. Next month, we will have our first COMELEC debate, so watch out for that. And marami pong debates, we will be covering town halls and interviews. So be sure that Campaign Convos will be here to analyze things for you and help you understand the candidates. So maraming salamat for joining us. Till the next episode. Bye!